What's up and good morning, War Report family? It's your guy, Ike Jones. We are here with another morning drop today, talking about new commit Jaden Muskrat, who is now an offensive lineman for the Auburn Tigers. Let's get straight to it. Y'all know how we do right here, morning drop style. Let's drop it on them.
You are now listening to the War Report. Drop.
Morning drop here, sponsored by RogueShop.com. It's your guy, Ike Jones, Mike G in this morning, talking a little offensive line. There are new players, well, not new players, plural, one new player at the offensive line. Before we get into the conversation, y'all know you need to be visiting RogueShop.com using code RAPPORT. That lets them know you guys at the War Report sent you over there. Rogue Shop, America's #1 online dispensary. Mike G, how we feeling this morning, man?
Jaden Muskrat. Big get for Freeze Pop. So I think that this was.
Is Freeze Pop going to be what you're?
Yes,
you're going with?
100%. I'm going with that. 100%. I'm going with that. And I'm going to make that stick. We're going to make that stick, or I'm going to. Anyway, this was a big get for them. Offensive line. They're trying to bolster up. I think that there is a concerted effort to bolster the offensive line with the prospect of our guy from Michigan State. Being Peyton Thorne being the quarterback. So we'll see what they do with that. But, ultimately it's going to come down to protection for him. I think when we look at his PFF numbers, under pressure, not great, right? 29% under pressure. So if you get him on the run, he's going to make some mistakes, and protecting him is going to be job number one. So Jaden Muskrat is a big pickup.
Yeah, definitely good to get more depth in the offensive line room. That's something that we've been missing sorely. As you guys are getting in here, filing into the conversation, make sure you're sharing the video at the War Report on social media so that we know that share happened. We'd love to see when you guys are letting other folks know about what's going on here at the War Report. Go ahead and give us a thumbs up on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're just here watching because you want to hear us say something that you don't like, thank you very much for tuning in anyway, and we appreciate it very much. I always find it interesting on that note, people who are on social media who see a take by us and they're like, oh, this is another terrible take by the War Report. It's like, well, one of two things is happening. You're either hate watching, so you know all of the takes that we have, or you have no idea what you're talking about and you never actually watch us, but you're just talking about something randomly. And that's how I feel a lot of times when people start talking about quarterbacks and offensive linemen. You don't actually watch anything that happens with these players. You just have takes based upon random clips and cut-ups that you've seen of highlights, XYZ. You don't know enough to know what you're talking about, and it kind of frustrates me. I wonder if we have seen the best of Jaden Muskrat. Not a lot of snaps to be seen. Well, actually, I won't say that. He played a good bit last year, mostly at tackle, right tackle, opposite of Dylan Wade on the other side of that Tulsa offensive line. But they weren't a great line last year. Let's be clear. Tulsa wasn't fabulous at blocking last season. So I wonder if we've seen the best of Jaden Muskrat, or we just seeing the tip of the iceberg of what we've got to see with that young man.
Well, you've got to assume that if the coaches went out and got him, that they feel like they have not seen the best of him, right? Mm-hmm. And they feel like they can get the best out of him. So it really is going to continue to be about development. I keep preaching development when it comes to this staff. They have talked about being able to turn programs around quickly, and part of that will be protection on the offensive line. Can you play smash mouth football in the run game? Can you just get up there and move the trenches, move the line of scrimmage? Jaden Muskrat may end up being a big part of that. They think that they have a starting five right now on the offensive line, but we'll see if this kid can get in here this summer and mix it up a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, so taking a look at what we've done in the offensive line, I think is interesting, right? We have had 8 guys commit to Auburn since Hugh Freeze came on board. I'm going to put an asterisk next to Brayton Joyner because he's been riding with Auburn since before Hugh Freeze was even considered to be a portion of this staff. So 7 since Hugh Freeze specifically, but 8 overall in his tenure, because even though he was committed, he hadn't signed yet with Joyner. We're talking Dylan Wade, Connor Britton, the aforementioned Brayton Joyner, Avery Jones, Isavion Miller, Connor Liu, we got Clay Whedon, and now Jaden Muskrat, all on board with the offensive line since Hugh Freeze came on board. This shows a new commitment for this staff to making sure we've got protection for the quarterback They know the importance of making sure that you have people in the trenches that can do their thing. I'm looking forward to seeing what the combination of the best 5 is going to be for this group, though, because that's what's still going to be ironed out. Again, Jaden Muskrat played a lot of right tackle in his time. Projections are saying he might kick in to play a little guard for us. He comes in at 6'3", 303. At least that's what he was last year at Tulsa. Any thoughts about what if you I don't even know if you've given any thought to this. I might be putting you on the spot here. Who do you think right now we would be trotting out as a starting 5 on offensive line for Auburn?
I'm not sure about this, right? I think Dylan Wade makes the starting 5, right? I think Avery Jones makes the starting 5. You know, I think that a lot of the names that we've talked about, a lot this summer have a chance to make the starting 5, but they're continuing. There was one other name that they were looking at outside of Muskrat as well, too, bringing in. I just thought it was interesting because they brought in so many guys. And offensive line is not one of those positions where you rotate a lot, right? Like you don't rotate a lot at the offensive line. So a guy either plays and he's good, or he's injured and his backup comes in, or you're doing the offensive line shuffle, trying to find the best combination of guys, which is something that I hope Auburn quits. So, we talked to our guy Cole Kublik about this, about, kind of like the offensive line shuffle. He's just saying you get your best 5 out there. Certainly.
Right.
But I think when it comes to center, it's not one of those positions where like you could just put a guy in.
Right.
Yeah, your center has to be, he anchors that offensive line. He's like a second quarterback on the field. And that guy needs to know what's going on at all times. So moving somebody into that position from another position on the offensive line can be chaotic at times. And, Auburn's going to have to stay healthy. I think developing natural backups at each position is going to be super important. So all these guys that they're bringing in, it's going to be, important that they can perform at a high level. So Muskrat, definitely a guy they were targeting. We heard this name for a while. And now that we're into the end of the portaling, right? Like most of these kids are going to be finding a home here in the next week. If you were already in the portal, so that they can start summer workouts essentially with their teams.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. 2 former offensive linemen from Tulsa. We do have our new offensive coordinator. He decided to bring in 2 of his guys from his previous offensive line, 2 of which started the vast majority of the season. Now, Jaden Muskrat didn't start game 1 for Tulsa, but he started every other game after that. So when he got onto the field, he didn't relinquish that spot. But bringing in those 2 guys, you would assume he has you would know he has a lot of familiarity with them. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how they factor into the race for whatever position it is that they want to slide him into. Again, Jaden Muskrat thought to be, he played tackle the vast majority of his time at Tulsa. And I'm just looking at the size of offensive linemen for Auburn. And I think he could still play tackle. I haven't watched a ton of his film yet. I do have some Jaden Muskrat film, though. You guys know I took a look at some of the Tulsa film from last season. And so I do have film that would include Jaden Muskrat in there. So I am going to be doing some watch the film stuff on him coming up here very soon. That was at the request of our guy Dustin from over there at Up Tempo. He's like, hey, man, where you got some film for Jaden? I do have some Jaden Muskrat film I could roll out there for you. So we can look at both Dylan Wade and Jaden Muskrat working that offensive line. So looking forward to kind of seeing what the film tells us about him. Again, playing a lot of tackle, but projected to potentially slide in to play guard for Auburn. But the tackle position, I think, is one that's going to be super interesting going down. We do have Gunnar Britton, who played some tackle, but again, there are people who feel like he should slide in and play guard for Auburn. You've got Isaiah Miller, another guy who played a lot of tackle at the JUCO level, could potentially play guard as well for Auburn. So I think it's going to be interesting to see, I think, I'm a big Jeremiah Wright guy, right? He didn't play a lot in the spring. He was limited due to injuries. I think Jeremiah Wright is a guy that you want to have up front for your offensive line. If he can stay healthy, he's going to be a key piece. But because he does have the injury history, I think it's going to be interesting to kind of see how we are at the 2 deep. A lot of hype about Connor Liu and what he could do at the center/guard position. Haven't heard a ton about Braden Joyner yet. down there with the guys. So it's going to be interesting to see. He's one of the bigger guys, but he's shorter. So he definitely is an interior lineman. And then Clay Whedon is the other guy who's the young freshman who haven't really heard a ton about him, but hopefully we can get an opportunity to talk to some of these young men that are on the offensive line to kind of see what their progress is like. But I am looking forward to seeing who trots out as the two deep. We're going to get into the top of the fall coming up, and you're going to start to see those two deep lineups coming out and seeing where people are projected to start. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how that falls once we get into that position. But I'm looking forward to that for sure, because offensive line has been a bugaboo. Like, let's be clear. The offensive line has been a problem for this Auburn offense for a while. And it's good that for the first time, I think we feel good about the status of the offensive line going into the fall.
Yeah, it's going to be really important that they feel good about it because, again, you have a quarterback potentially that's going to need a lot of protection, Ike, to play at a high level. And so if you are not if he's not protected, I think it's going to be really difficult for Auburn to move the ball. So, this is where Robbie Ashford maybe comes back into play to help cover the offensive line a little bit, depending on how well they do. So, we'll see what the direction they decide to go. And, I have questions, because offensive line is such a developmental position. You wonder about guys being able to catch up during the summer months and going into fall camp and how much ground they can make up there. So we'll see. Hopefully he's putting in the work.
Yeah, I am definitely looking forward to seeing. I'm interested to see how some of these guys who are still in that room. There aren't a ton, right? When I look at this roster, and I had it pulled up over here, let me get back to it, of guys returning in this offensive line room: Jaleel Irvin, Take Johnson, EJ Harris, who was the Auburn University. Auburn High School guy who came in redshirt freshman last year, Cameron Stutz, and Garner Langlow. I'm interested to see Jeremiah Wright, of course. Interested to see how those guys factor into this race, because I think when we hear the conversations about we got to get better in these rooms, the offensive line is one of those rooms that I think universally everybody felt that about. And so I think it's interesting to see the guys who stuck around and chose not to jump into the transfer portal, and how they are going to factor in as far as playing time and in whether or not they're going to get into the two deep and what kind of work they're putting in during this summer / going into the fall camp. I'm super interested to see that, because I think it's going to be telling where they land on the roster. Muskrat's a guy who's got a lot of eligibility too. So we talked about this when we're talking about bringing in a quarterback, right? A guy with a lot of eligibility who comes in as a transfer really means that they feel good about him multiple years, not just as a 1 year. Britton came in 1 year. Avery Jones, I think, has 2 years, but likely only going to be a 1 year fill in. So you bring in a guy with multiple years. That means that some of the guys that you have on your roster right now, you're not feeling great about where they are.
Yeah, the chat is tripping me out this morning. But this is going to be a multi-year project. We get asked probably like a few times a week, what is the floor for this team? And I think the floor will have a lot to do with, what the offensive line does, for both of these, quarterbacks, and for in the run game for Jarquez Hunter and Damari Alston and Battie and those guys. So being able to move the line of scrimmage is going to be so important. And, I know Hugh Freeze has, talked about, he's trying to temper expectations, but he also said he's a guy who turns programs around quickly. I don't think you do that without rebuilding the offensive line here.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not going to be possible to have a cohesive. It's hard. Listen, when the offensive line is good, then we can judge all of these quarterbacks, I think, more evenly, right? Like, if it's not a situation of we have to play the guy who's got the wheels because he's got no prayer back there behind the offensive line, now we have a more even footing to judge, okay, do we have a pass game to speak of? And we can eliminate one of the problems in the pass game. It's like, okay, we've got the protection now. So the question is, can the quarterback deliver? Can the wide receivers get open? And if they are open, are they going to make the catch when it gets there, right? So we can eliminate one of the issues that people have had with the pass game. Now we can judge whether or not the quarterback has the ability to make the throws. And then again, whether or not the wide receivers are going to be able to get open. So it's going to be important, again, for the quarterback race, that the offensive line gets sound. We have a sound run game. So then again, we can see whether or not that quarterback can stand up to whatever heat that they bring. But speaking of heat, we have Harmon Mechanical out here with your heating and air needs.
Yeah.
Harmon Mechanical is servicing the Auburn, Alabama area. So if you're in the area and you need to get your HVAC system checked out, make sure you hit up our guys at Harmon Mechanical Heating and Air. HarmonMechanical.com is the website. You can go check out them. A lot of great reviews. We had them come and do some work for our guy B. Will down there in the Auburn area. He had great things to say about the technician that came and checked out his HVAC. You can hit them up online, or you can give them a call to set up your first consultation at 334-219-0717. Harmon Mechanical is there when you need air. We are going to be here to see what you guys are talking about right now in the chat. Go ahead and share the video, like the video if you haven't already. We'll get it kicked off with B Will's forehead, B Will Forehead 2.0. We have come to find out that there are actually two versions of the forehead, spelled a little differently, new upgrade to it. But here in the chat, if Coleman comes or doesn't come, I guess that will tell us what he thinks about Thorne. This is about the wide receiver transfer from Michigan State. A lot of people have speculated that they are not necessarily on the best of terms, and that may prevent one from coming or the other. We already have the quarterback. I don't know if I agree that him coming or not has anything directly related to Thorne, but I honestly just think he's just going to go wherever he feels like it's the best. So I don't know if it's a Thorne situation or if it's Auburn's not the best.
I thought I saw a comment from Corey Weber in here saying pretty definitively Thorne's not coming. So
Coleman's not coming.
Coleman is his Coleman. I was like, yeah, Coleman's not coming. So like, the focus is going to be on these other.
Yeah, he
other
did
receivers.
say that.
Yeah.
I don't. So here's the thing: there were reports out there that Coleman was potentially going to be coming on a visit this weekend. There have never been any confirmations as to that actually happening. And the day that people were reporting that he was supposed to be in Auburn, he was definitely at Florida State. So this sounds like another one of those situations. Like, who was the quarterback last year? Everybody was like, "Oh, I just saw him down on Magnolia walking around with somebody," and he just wasn't here at all. Caleb Williams last year. Everybody was like, they saw Caleb Williams in Auburn. Caleb Williams was never in Auburn. This sounds like another one of those situations where Coleman was definitely not in Auburn, but people were reporting that he was supposed to be here. So I don't have a ton of high expectations on us landing Coleman in the transfer portal. But again, I don't know that that has any direct correlation to his feelings about whether or not Thorne is the guy going forward. So
yeah, it's still got to be a good fit both ways, right? So you still need a good fit from an offensive standpoint. He's got to evaluate that independent of Peyton Thorne and see if this is going to be a good situation for him. So I agree.
Yeah. All right. John Brandon jumps in and says, that's the sound of Hugh Freeze building a legacy. Speaking of the construction noise going on in the background there with Mike G, getting some work done on the house. But yes, we are building rapport in all kinds of ways today. Hopefully you guys are able to focus on us and stop thinking about what's happening in the construction in the background. Philip Hall says, name like Muskrat sounds good in the trenches. I see what you did right there, Philip Hall.
Yeah.
Good in the trenches, Muskrat. I don't actually know what kind of environment muskrats hang out in. I did make a muskrat joke on my Twitter talking about the song by Captain and Tennille being an Auburn grad. Had to throw that in there, you know what I'm saying? So good on Philip here for bringing out the muskrat puns like it. Chris Sanders, I really think Miller is a guard. Speaking of Xavion Miller, the JUCO transfer, who is was not there. Actually, no, I think he was there. I was going to say, I don't think he was there this spring, but I might have to take that back. I'll have to go back and look and see and make sure he was there. But anyway, Xavion Miller coming on board. He has been projected as kicking into a guard. Like, I think it's interesting because we do have guys who have played tackle, but potentially will be playing guard for Auburn. So that shows some versatility that they could play at both spots. But I think it will be super interesting to see who actually lands at the tackle position, because that's going to be super important for Auburn to make sure. There are some really good exterior pass rushers here in the SEC that we're going to have to play against. And those guys can play from either side. So if you've got a really good tackle on one side, they're just going to slide them to the other side and rush from the other. So you need to have two good ones and it's going to be interesting to see who is there. Any thoughts on this one here?
Yeah, not really. Listen, man, I expect a lot of teams to pin their ears back and make Peyton Thorne try to beat him if he ends up being the starting quarterback. The stats, the tape say that's the way to go against him. So, again, these guys are just going to have to find a way to protect this guy and, hope that he can be accurate.
Corey jumps in here, says, don't forget about the big JUCO 6'9", 345 coming to visit this weekend. Staff wants him enrolled this month. Have heard some rumblings about the young JUCO player. His name escapes me right now, but very big guy. Again, not somebody who I've watched tape on, but of course, being really big helps to be able to play offensive line. But the question is, how well does he move? Not how big is he, right? 6'9" is enormous, though. Like Bruce Pearl might want to go holler at him and say, hey, 345 is too big to be playing basketball, but 6'9".
Yeah, your knees won't survive that on the basketball court at all.
Chris Sanders jumps in and says the construction is metaphorical sound of how Coach Hugh Freeze is rebuilding the program. Not mad at that.
Yeah, need to tear it up, man, and rebuild it from the ground up.
And then we've got B Will's forehead jumping back in. Jeremiah Wright's going to ball out this year, impose some hurt on defensive ends.
Yeah, you certainly hope so, man, with a lot of these guys, right? Especially for a guy like Jeremiah Wright, who's been through some stuff. He's kind of been a journeyman, jumping from, one side of the ball to the other. Like, you hope that this is one of those deals where he really can shine this year. But like it looks like an all-out competition at offensive linemen this fall. So it'll be interesting to see how that competition goes and where everybody falls. But Jeremiah Wright is a guy that's easy to root for here.
Yeah, for sure. Dustin Pace asks, think we retain any of our guys in the portal right now? So speaking of guys who have jumped in the portal, is there a possibility for any of them to come back from the portal? I don't think so. I think the vast majority of the guys who left in the portal were pretty asked to leave is something I don't like saying. I think that they were told that it was a distinct possibility that they would not be rising in the depth chart based upon what they saw in the spring. And so if they wanted to play this year, their best option would be to go and transfer. So I think the vast majority, the only one of those guys that is still on the Auburn website listed on the roster is Powell Gordon. All the rest of them aren't even on the website anymore. So he was the only one that actually left the option open to return when he made his announcement that he was going to be potentially leaving. So he would be the only person that I would think could potentially come back. The rest of them, I think, are gone. Some of them have already committed elsewhere. The ones that are still out there have been out there for a long time. If they had an intent to return, I think they would have made those intentions known to the coaching staff by now. So I would anticipate no, but any thoughts on that one, Mike G?
Yeah, they gone. Nobody coming back, right? So this is, after the spring, you have a clearer picture of where you stand. So I would be shocked to see any of the guys that jumped in the portal post-spring come back.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I would really be shocked. So, and they're not wasting time filling spots either. So, listen, man, hopefully you got a spot to come back to if that's the decision that you make.
Yeah, I think if you jump into the transfer portal, you should jump in with the intent to go somewhere, right? It doesn't really matter whether it's an upgrade or downgrade. Go get a scholarship football position on somebody's team and go put film out there for somebody to see. You can always go work your butt off, graduate, and get back up to the P5 route sometime later if that's necessary. But go get film, man. If you don't feel like you're going to get film where you are, go get some film from somewhere. And I'm not talking about practice film. I mean actual game reps where people can see what you're doing against other competition, and coaches have something to be able to evaluate your ability to play against other collegiate athletes against. Your high school tape isn't enough. Hear me again. I don't know how many potential athletes are out there even watching the War Report. Your high school tape isn't enough. Practice film is not enough, especially if you didn't come out of high school as a high 4-star, 5-star guy. They'll take a flyer on you as a high 4-star, 5-star guy with no game film. But if you're low 4-star and below, go get some game film somewhere. That's your route to be able to get to your next destination if you want to play professional football, basketball, whatever it is. That's my only advice to you. Take it or leave it.
Agreed.
All right. All right, people, that's all we got this morning. We appreciate you guys jumping in here with us at the War Report. As always, we are sponsored by Rogue Shop. Head over to rogueshop.com using code REPORT. That will let them know the guys at the War Report sent you. We are going to be back at you tomorrow morning. So much more to talk about. We got to talk basketball at some point in time. So tomorrow morning, maybe we jump into a little basketball conversation. If not, we will definitely talk about it on the midweek report tomorrow. You guys make sure you tap in with us. So much more content coming from your guys here at the War Report. We'll be back at you very soon. As always, share the video. Like the video before you get out of here. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. We're out of here. War Eagle. Peace.